Consideration and possible action on application of David and Robin Rush by Derek Bird of Gummerson and Associates for certificate of appropriateness to 1, demolish garage elective, and 2, construct garage elective. I will note that the applicant has already said they would like item number 2, construct garage, to be continued because there are some revisions that they would like to make to the proposed new design that kind of happened in between when all of the materials were due for this meeting and now. So that item they've requested to be continued. And then just to explain, because I know this will look familiar, we saw a different application for almost the identical project several months ago, and it was denied. They have since reapplied with a new structural engineer's report with additional information, and so that's why it's back before you today.
Is this the same letter that was in our packet?
Possibly. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive.
December 17th letter.
Let me start by saying what an honor it is to be here on Commissioner Tague's final HP hearing. Our firm has certainly enjoyed working, I would say with you, but next to you at the other podium for years. So.
Are you sure you don't want to continue both items?
No, yeah, you know, the last one we got to take a crack at it.
Courageous man, courageous.
Yeah. Appreciate your time. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Rush, who is the property owner, who's also here. Mr. Bird and Mr. Gummerson are also here, as well as Mr. Joyce, who is the structural engineer that provided the report that you have before you. So I'm sure you're asking what has changed. What has changed is Mr. Joyce went back and did a second inspection after certain portions of the structure had been partially demolished, allowing him to see the real issues with this structure. And I would like him to address what he found. So I know you have it in your report, but I would like him to come up here and address the extent of the problems that this structure has.
Hi, I'm John Joyce, 909 Northwest 37th. I'm a structural engineer, and as David stated, I've made a couple different trips out to this house. I've been asked over the years, several of you probably read letters from me, talking about garages that were an owner wanted to demolish, and I kind of understand the guidelines in terms of the wording that is required. And the thing that was different about this garage from a lot of ones I've looked at in the past, a couple things. You know, the brick veneer on the outside is a little bit unusual, but probably the biggest thing was just the fact that typically when you're looking at one of these little old wood frame garages, you can see the inside, especially inside the garage portion. You can see all the studs are exposed, the bottom plate is exposed. Even inside the quarters, sometimes those, you know, the sheetrock or I'm sorry, plaster, whatever was original is gone, and you can see exactly what's going on. If you can't, it's real easy to just, you know, kind of push it with your foot and it all plaster falls off. You know, that's kind of the state we're talking about. In this one, somebody had really gone to a lot of trouble to cosmetically make everything look just, you know, as good as it possibly could. You could tell from being inside the quarters that not only the Rushes, but even a prior owner, somebody had you know, lived inside there. Apparently there were some issues with that. But anyway, my inspection was very limited, and so when I did finally write my report, I told them, I said that this kind of falls short of, from what I've seen, as to what, you know, the wording that I would typically use, and we went ahead and submitted it. And but anyway, later they did quite a bit more demolition, and I looked at it, and the striking thing to me was actually, I was seeing some pictures a second ago. If we could flip to the one that kind of shows the back of the house, yeah, right there. Some of that brick veneer there is really has buckled very severely. And when I looked at that the first time, I just sort of attributed it to, you know, all the brick ties of, if there were any originally, have kind of rotted out, and so the brick, just of its own weight, is kind of leaning out a little bit. But as I was able to look and see the bottom plate at the inside and see that it was in fact all completely rusted away, the bottom of the wood studs were severely deteriorated, I realized that, or concluded with this new information, that what is happening is that the brick veneer is actually acting as the structural wall right now. And the only thing that's keeping that wall from dropping several inches is that brick veneer. It's picking up that load, and it's actually that load that's causing that brick veneer to kind of punch out. And it wouldn't be, it's not far-fetched at all to think that, a big section of that brick could just kind of, at a moment's notice, could just kind of explode, come out and hit somebody. So I thought, okay, well, this clearly meets the provision of the code, of the guidelines, excuse me. So that is when I drafted the revised report. If anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them.
I just have one comment, John, because what you said about the sill plate is common in most garages. I don't want you to come and look at mine because you declare it a public hazard probably. But there's ways of repairing that the sill plate and the studs, is there not?
Well, again, so that kind of comes to the second part of it, which I think it kind of met all along, which is, what do you do to replace it? Well, sure, yeah, you replace. Okay, look at the foundation. Well, that's no good. Okay, you look at the walls. Okay, the stud framing there is no good. You look at the brick veneer. It's just where would you stop? I mean, to me, for it to be a properly engineered structure or whatever, you'd have to replace virtually everything. So, what's the difference?
Everything but the roof, right? Because I looked at that property and saw the walls were kind of breaking down inside and out. I think last time we discussed this, the only thing that would stay was the roof. And actually, the roof joists were spanned too far apart. So, I mean, the roof isn't the roofing is not a structural component, but yeah, right, so now if we're talking about, okay, we're basically, if we were pulling a building permit and we're remodeling, we're bringing it up to code, so to speak, then the roof framing wouldn't meet code anyway. I mean, sure, there's things you could do. If it was a house that the garage where George Washington grew up or something, I mean, so again, to me, and I know that it's kind of like that wouldn't really come into play except for the fact that it does meet the criteria about, the potential danger. That's my understanding anyway. Further questions from commissioners?
Sorry. I think it is important to note that your staff on page 8 does recommend approval, and that is based on the fact, and I'm going to quote, complies with all relevant guidelines and sections of the municipal code. This application meets each and every one of the guidelines that this body is charged with upholding. When you have a structural engineer that is saying in its current condition it is an imminent threat to the public safety, I see no reasonable reason to deny a CA, where your staff, after a thorough review, based on the guidelines that this body is charged with following, says it complies with each and every one of them.
Further questions or comments? Do we have a motion? Motion. Yes, ma'am.
I move to deny HPCA-14-00010, items 1, without prejudice, with the specific findings that the proposed work will have an adverse effect on the historic character of the district.
We have a motion for denial from Jennifer Bourne. Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
Seeing no second, the motion fails. Do we have another motion? Seeing no motion, the CA doesn't move.
I will make a motion to approve HPCA 14-00010 with specific findings that, no, on the wrong one. Specific findings that the proposer will not have an adverse effect on the historic character of the district or the property and complies with all relevant guidelines.
Okay, we have a motion for approval of 14-10 by George Massey. Do we have a second?
I think we need to
George,
add some specific...
You need some findings that are in the ordinance.
Those other two also. Yeah, I mean... Page 5 of 8.
Page 5.
Red 1.
3 and, yeah, 5, page 4 of the staff report.
Roland, don't you think if he just includes the specific findings 1, 2, and 3 on page 5, that's sufficient?
I think his motion referenced the findings, those specific findings. So that's what we would include, unless there are additional findings you want to...
Because it has a standard finding, right? The standard motion.
To the specific findings?
The specific
1, 2, and
ones
3.
just at the top. You just read those, George, I think.
Okay. That the garage contributes to the historic district and then loss would adversely affect the integrity and character of the property and district. That the garage posed an imminent threat to public health and safety, which can only be alleviated through demolition. Number 3, that mitigation of the deterioration of the garage would require substantial or total reconstruction of the structure.
Okay, we have a motion by George Massey for approval of item number 1. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ann Zacharias. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion
Thank you.
passes.
Mr. Tague, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Did we take action on the continuance on number 2 already?
No.
Oh, we didn't officially continue that.
30 days.
Excuse me?
I think 30 days would be sufficient.
30 days is fine. Okay, do we have a motion for continuance on item number 2 for 30 days?
So moved.
It needs to continue to April 2nd.
Continue to April 2nd.
Okay, we have a motion for continuance of item number 2 to the April 2nd meeting by Neil Crank Clements. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by George Massey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Commissioner Gaines, I need to abstain from the next case. Abstain voting.
Okay. We do. We have 5. 14-12.
921 Northwest 16th Street, Mesta Park, Ward 6. Consideration and possible action on application of Greg McAllister for certificate of appropriateness to 1, demolish small accessory structure and fence elective, 2, construct house elective, 3, construct garage